the Autoline Supplier Symposium. Here now is your host, John McElroy.
Welcome back to the 5th annual Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the 2017 Detroit Auto Show at the Ford display. This place is jam-packed right now because it's industry days, and all kinds of people from both the OEMs and the suppliers are here to catch what's on the floor of the show. But joining me right now are three of my friends who are going to talk about what's going on in the supplier end of the business. This panel, by the way, was organized by the Original Equipment Supplier Association, and that's pretty good because we've got their Executive Director for Strategy Research and their Senior Economist, Charles Chesbrough. Charlie, great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Also joining us today is Ken Hopkins. He's the President and CEO of NEPCO Holdings, LLC. And we've also got Len Offenbacher, the CEO and President of Inteva Products. Great to have all three of you here. But I got to ask you, Ken, because a lot of people probably have not heard of NEPCO. What is it?
So it's NEAPCO.
NEAPCO,
Yeah,
excuse me. Gosh dang it.
NEAPCO has been around since 1921. It originated in Connecticut, New England Auto Products Company, and had been around for 90 years doing a lot of aftermarket and off-highway things. And then about 2008, we purchased the driveline assets from Visteon. And so then we got into the auto industry.
Very interesting. New England Auto Products.
Yeah.
Who would have ever figured?
Yeah.
And Lon, just in case people are not up to speed with what Inteva is, bring us up to speed.
Well, Inteva, we started as a spinoff out of Delphi. We're the interiors business. We do roofs, sunroofs. We do closure systems and motors and electronics. We got 50 locations around the world. We're in 18 countries, 5 continents. Pretty
Big
busy.
operation.
Pretty busy.
You took some pieces and you really built it into something.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, let's get into the discussion here. Charlie, I want to start off with you because you track the thinking that's going on in the automotive supplier community. And some of your research has been showing some increasing pessimism. Explain why. And I asked why because, hey, we just finished in North America another all-time record.
That's right, John. We had a record year, coming off of a record year last year, so you would think suppliers would be really happy and optimistic. But I think one of the main issues they're looking at is the difficulty that they see on the horizon with the economy, that maybe not for this year, but when we look over the longer term, that there's just a lot of headwinds that they know are coming. One being slower growth rates on vehicle sales. We're well past the recovery phase of the last recession, and so there's not a lot of growing opportunity in the marketplace. Sales are pretty much going to be flatlining a bit from here. And we're looking at higher interest rates when we look down the road, and that's always concerning to certainly suppliers and consumers, and so that's going to put some threat on the vehicle volumes that we've seen. But that's not to take anything away from the great year we just had in 2016, and I think that we're probably looking at something similar to that here in 2017 as well.
Ken, what's your thoughts? You pessimistic or optimistic looking forward?
Yeah, I'm clearly in the optimistic side, and I understand everything that Charles said. There's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic. You can take a look at the high inventory rates of the Detroit 3, I think highest in 8 years right now. You can take a look at the extra incentives that are being thrown on cars to sell them, but you know what, I'll take 18.5 million or 17.5 million. I think more importantly, John, is it's important to take a look at the opportunities ahead of us. Sure, we can't always count on an extra million vehicles next year to continue to drive our sales. Now is when it starts to really get good, in my mind, as management and as leadership. You get an opportunity to say, where are the winners going to be? Where are the losers are going to be? You can do that from technology, you can do it from platforms, and now is really where we kind of separate the winners from the losers. And as long as you plan on being a winner, life's good.
Okay, now I got to ask Len, is the glass half full or half empty?
Yeah, I think it's, I would call myself cautiously optimistic. There's really nothing on the horizon that looks like cataclysmic. Obviously, we got a kind of a funny political environment. We got a lot of funny kind of stuff going on, but it's still pretty strong. And the products are just outstanding, and the amount of new launches that are coming on, and to Ken's point, you have to look at where you're at and the places you're playing in. And we supply virtually everybody in the industry that makes cars or trucks. And so you kind of look at it and you say, we're on the right vehicles, we're with the right partners, just keep working it.
Len, let me ask you this. Last year, several supplier executives told me they wouldn't mind if car sales slowed down just a little bit because they were running so much overtime and had so many expedited shipments that if things slowed down a little bit, they told me they'd actually be more profitable. Do you see it that way or no?
I'm not really sure. I think a lot of it depends on what you're doing and how you do it. We've pretty much managed the demand cycle with our capability, so we really haven't had to run a lot of overtime. We are full, but running 2 shifts, you might have a 3rd shift to give, you might have a Saturday to give, and that's about the float point in the market right now. We got a couple customers that are over the top, but they're managing their own assembly process. So that's where I actually feel pretty comfortable about it.
Charlie, is it possible too that as you survey the members at OESA and you've picked up on this growing pessimism, that maybe it's going to change? Could it be that since the election, maybe there's more certainty? And I ask that in the sense that if you look at the business confidence index, it has shot way up. You look at the stock market, it's off to the races.
Consumer confidence is taking
Consumer
off.
confidence is up. Could it be that your next survey will show a change of opinion in the supplier community?
I think it's possible. I will say, though, that in terms of trade policy, there's a lot of uncertainty that's just been unleashed, and that's going to have a significant impact for many of our members, and that's going to make their business planning that much more of a challenge. The one thing I also think that's contributing to some of the pessimism out there for suppliers that we found in our own research is that the ability to find workers is becoming a real challenge, and that labor supply has been an issue talked about in this town for quite some time. There's just not enough engineers to go around and skilled workers. Well, that problem is going to continue, and in our last survey we'd asked folks what are their major concerns for 2017, and finding labor was relatively low compared to other things, but for about 20% of our respondents it was named as one of the top 2 concerns that they have in 2017, of being able to find skilled workers in order to meet the demand requirements that they have. So it's not an issue for everybody, but for some suppliers it's a very pressing problem for them.
Ken, is it a problem at NAIAS?
I could see it being a problem going forward. Last year was a great year for us. We hired 130 people in the Detroit area, 50 salary workers, 80 direct labor workers. So we really it wasn't impossible, it was a bit challenging. We see it getting a little bit more difficult. And I agree with Charles, that's one of the 2 things that is probably on top of our mind, and the other one, of course, being the trade. Uncertainty about what's going to happen in this Trump era.
Do you have plants in Mexico?
I have plants in Mexico. In fact, built a plant last year.
Oh, yeah.
But 75% of that product goes outside of North America. So we didn't build it just to import parts into America. And in fact, we've been working ever since Trump was elected on our secondary plan. What happens if X, A, B, or C happens?
Gotcha. And Len, how about you? You have a problem getting people?
Whenever this question comes up, I like to tell just my 30-second pitch on when we launched the company. I told our HR VP that Tom Munley, I said, look, first and foremost, we're going to have a strong co-op and internship program. We did that from day one, and we have grown that now into a very strong college recruit program too. So we have a really strong field coming up through the from the bottom up, and great training, and the organization embraces it. It's all about culture, right? So our people are grabbing a hold of these kids, we're helping them grow up, and we've got a new program that is actually helping solidify it with our college recruits, where we actually send them out to the manufacturing floor for the first 12 to 18 months of their career, and they get to see the mistakes and the successes of the work that they would be doing back in if they were just straight into an engineering design kind of a program. So it's been a lot of fun. We really haven't had, there's spot problems, process control engineers, in a remote location, but in general we've been very successful with our recruiting program and bringing people in through the process.
Lon, you've got plants all over the world. Do you find this issue that Charlie's raised here of trouble getting people in other countries as well?
There's spots that are tougher. Eastern Europe it's a little bit tougher because the talent pool's been saturated. Germany, sometimes it's tougher to find because it's pretty much at full employment for engineers. But I'd say in general, China, no. In fact, we introduced co-op education in our China locations, and we now have a class of about 20 every year that are going through a co-op education program. So we're using the tools effectively around the world.
Ken, let's change a little bit to what's going on in the marketplace. There is so much change going on. It almost seems that as if someone threw the switch and people are abandoning passenger cars and going into crossovers, or small vans and big vans have really caught fire, certainly the big ones. How do you deal with these changes, these shifts in the marketplace? Because when you get an order from a car company, it's a couple of years before you actually have to put it in production if you're on an advanced program. How do you deal with these changes?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, John. I think that's what I was alluding to even earlier, is that we may have some dynamics that are changing, whether it's trade related or whether it's consumer demand. And I think that's what a management team needs to do. You need to take a look at your resources. You need to build flexibility into it in the beginning, and then learn how to react. If you take a look at a change as a negative, then it's going to be a negative. If you look at it as an opportunity, then you just need to go and execute. I don't think that there's an easy answer, because we all have capital tied up. We all have people tied up that are trained along these lines. But we rely on people like Charles to give us a little bit of insight into what's going to actually happen. I think we've seen some OEMs get hurt this past year. Toyota talked about it, Kia talked about it with not having enough of the crossovers and enough of the pickup trucks. But I don't think there's a great answer. Even with guys like Charles, you can't look into the crystal ball and be perfectly clear. You just need to be ready to react.
Mm-hmm. Same question to you, Lon. How do you deal with the shifts in the marketplace?
I think Ken actually said it fairly well. You've got to manage your exposure, yes, but you can't really pick the winners and losers, right? I mean, I can look at the Bolt and say, wow, if Elon is going to sell 400,000 of his Model 3, then Chevy ought to sell 600,000 of these guys, right? So there's some exciting new products, but how will they catch on? Because it's a passenger car, right? And right now you want the utility of a larger vehicle. But unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, I got a lot of gray hair. I've seen these cycles. Back in, I think it was 1981, I was a young engineer, and the market changed overnight when Saudi Arabia said, not shipping you any oil, right? And all of a sudden, GM went from 100 days of inventory of Chevettes to 3 days. And the Impala went from 3 days to 180 days, because they just changed. So I think the current market conditions are dynamic. We happen to have a lot of product on SUVs and full-size trucks, so I feel really good. But we also have products on, smaller cars too. So it's going to be a dynamic market, but I think you can flex and work your people on alternate projects if it really came to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up on the car just yet. I think when we see the buying conditions change and the economy slows a bit down the road from here, and interest rates are higher, and gasoline prices maybe rise a bit, consumers are going to be looking for affordability yet again. And in general, these crossovers and SUVs, and certainly the pickups, are all more expensive vehicles than your basic four-door sedan. And consumers may be coming back home, if you will, to these types of vehicles.
Charlie, anything else on your radar screen there that you're warning suppliers about? You ought to keep your heads up and eyes open about something coming?
Well, it's just that, when I do all the charts and I look at where the economy may be going, it's hard to see anything on the horizon right now that would knock us off this trajectory. Certainly many of the things that the Trump administration has proposed in terms of increased spending and tax cuts are all going to be great for business and consumers. But we're 9 years since the last recession began, and sort of when you chart this stuff out, we're about due. The recessions usually come up about every 6 to 8 years, or maybe a little bit
the
longer.
last recession was unlike any other in
And
our
that's true.
lifetimes.
So maybe we're on a different trajectory. That's certainly possible. But it does seem like when you look at where the unemployment rates are today, and 4.7%, I think the most recent one, as well as initial unemployment claims, I think they're at 43-year lows. We don't stay at these levels for very long until something happens in the economy to force a change in the labor market. It just seems timing-wise we're getting about due. But like I said, it's hard to see anything that's going to cause it right about now.
Ken, what's your sense?
Yeah, I think Charles is right. There's an inevitability around the auto industry. It's cyclical. We've heard that since we were little kids. And so that's the industry we decided to be in. What's really interesting to me is, we may be long in the tooth, but there's a change happening right now. We talked about this a few months ago, John. We don't know what's going to happen when ride sharing comes in or autonomous vehicles, but it's going to be a change. So whether the change happens to us or whether we cause the change, we just have to be ready for it. I can't tell you what it's going to be.
And Lon, you get the final thought on this. What's your outlook?
Well, I'm kind of a born optimist. I think that the market finds itself, and when there's changes, we know how to react. I mean, we were just in New York with the bankers a few months ago, and Wall Street's already figured out that there's going to be a massive recession or something, right? And I'm looking at it and saying, really? I mean, it's happened once in like 70 years. So I don't think, but can there be a correction? And oh, by the way, most of us that were around in 2008 and 9, we know what the tools are. We know how to react. So it's not like, a bunch of lemmings that are going to jump off the cliff into the ocean. So I think the industry is much better equipped to handle change and to handle the dynamics of a changing market.
I think that's a great point, and a good point to wrap up on too. This is a tough industry.
It is.
It's been through a lot. It's been through the worst of times, and things look pretty good right now. Let's hope that continues.
Right.
I want to thank all three of you for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, John.